This is The Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from WURD Radio. You can listen to Word Radio anytime, anywhere on wordradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download us today. In this episode, Maurice Mitchell, the National Director for the Working Families Party, chats with Reality Check host Tonya Pendleton about how they educate voters and how the public can support their efforts. And Jared C. Bass, the Senior VP for Education Policy at Center for American Progress, joins Evening Words host Dr. James Peterson to discuss plans to eliminate the Department of Education. But first, U.S. Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon joins Wake Up With WURD host Solomon Jones to discuss the Atlantic editor-in-chief viewing classified war plans that were sent to him hours before they were enacted.
Joining us now, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon. Congresswoman Scanlon, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. So last time I saw you, Kamala Harris was winning a debate against Donald Trump. I believe I talked to you in the media spin room. And, here we are. And, one of the things that I have been saying for quite some time is that Democrats have to fight harder. This morning, a story comes out about the administration, top officials in the administration, using a non-classified app to discuss classified war plans and accidentally including a journalist from the Atlantic in that chat. All I could think about was Hillary Clinton and the emails and the big deal they made about that. How can Democrats fight in this moment?
I think we are fighting in this moment. We're trying to take the argument to the voters who voted for Trump. Certainly my colleagues, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, were on a Western tour last week during our district week, going out and talking to voters in historic red states. Jamie Raskin and I went up to Pennsylvania's 7th congressional district, which used to be the district of Susan Wild and is now held by a congressman who is refusing to have town halls. So we went up there and had a town hall for him. I mean, we are trying to use all the tools that we do have, which would be to legislate where we can. We're still in the minority, but we need to convince some Republicans to see the light. We're litigating, working with the unions and places like Democracy Forward that are trying to slow down what this crazy illegal administration is doing. And we're agitating, trying to make sure people know what's going on and just how illegal and unconstitutional and crazy this administration is.
So in terms of convincing Republicans, they watched January 6th just like the rest of us and voted for him anyway in the millions, in the tens of millions. And is that the best strategy, trying to convince people who would vote for him despite watching all of that, watching him get 34 felony convictions, watching the accusations against by women, watching him being held liable for sexual abuse, watching him being held liable for then libeling people, after that, like all of that. Are these people that you believe you can actually convince, given that they watched all that happen and voted for him anyway?
Well, we're starting to see some cracks in that that coalition that's there as the impact of what this administration is doing is starting to hit people. So one of the first hits we saw were police officers and law enforcement being appalled by the fact that Trump pardoned folks who had beat Capitol Police and law enforcement on January 6th. They said that's not what we voted for. And the National Association of Police Chiefs came out and said, whoa, that's not great. Now we're seeing, as the threats to Medicaid are becoming real and as the threats to Social Security is becoming real, as we're seeing veterans being laid off across the country, people are starting to say, whoa, that's not what I wanted. I wanted, lower prices. You said this was you said this was Biden's fault. So fix it. So I do think where Democrats need to work is on meeting people where they are. And people who voted for Trump are on Fox and on Twitter. And so either Democrats have to be there, which is increasingly difficult, or we have to have alternative sources of information like this show.
Mm-hmm. You know, what's interesting, I watched Donald Trump start Truth Social after he was kicked off other social media platforms for various violations of their standards of conduct. And I also watched Elon Musk buy Twitter and then reveal himself as this huge Trump supporter. And so those are platforms that are owned by the opposition. Is what plan is there on the left to try to counter that? Because, if they own these platforms, it's not like you're going to have a huge voice on them. So what plan is there to counter them?
Sure. And in fact, we see, messaging being throttled. And if I am seeing pro-Trump garbage on my Twitter feed, what is someone who's actually a supporter seeing? And I do think Twitter is a huge lesson here for America, because we've seen what a garbage fire that platform has turned into under Musk's leadership, because he broke it down. He fired the people who were, making it a good place to get news, et cetera. And now we're seeing him take the same approach to the federal government. And there's a big difference when you basically fire everyone in the federal government and try to just totally break down the system. When you do that to Social Security or Medicaid or veterans benefits, people get sick, people die. People don't get fed when you're doing it to the Department of Agriculture and student lunches. So I think it's a huge demonstration, and not a good one, of why, sure, having some business principles are good in government, but government has different purposes. So with respect to your question, what are Democrats doing? There's a lot of efforts to get out there and do different types of social media. The House Democrats have stood up a number of podcasts and trying to do a better job of getting out there. The leadership now has a daily video that's going out, produced here in-house. So trying to do, it's a lot, and it's trying to play catch up. And it does kind of demonstrate a big difference between the parties, which under Trump, the Republican Party has been the party of reality TV and media. And I think Democrats have been busy trying to run the country, trying to make it work for people. So, you do have this conflict between the politics of it all and actually the job.
And you bring up a good point, because I think when you are dealing with someone who is willing to engage in spectacle at all times and constantly, it becomes hard to get serious messages through, because people are consumed by the spectacle. And so how do you fight against spectacle when you are trying to, be a serious party that's actually trying to run the country?
That is the challenge we're up against. And of course, the spectacle right now, part of the spectacle is this absolute fire hose of crazy coming from the White House with a different order every day, ripping down an agency or jailing people or attacking law firms and businesses and colleges and universities. It's a lot, and it's distracting, but we know that's actually a strategy. So, we are trying to do a better job of making sure that we're out there, and that's partly why folks are going out and holding town halls, where Republicans have literally been told not to hold town halls because their constituents are mad. I thought the strategy of sticking your fingers in your ears and saying, la, 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 I can't hear you, was something you're supposed to get over in middle school. But apparently that's right now a communication strategy across the aisle. But I've always found that trying to be out in my community and talking to people directly and going everywhere I can has been the way that I can build trust with the folks that I represent.
Yeah.
It's harder to do that on a national scale.
We're talking with Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon about what Democrats are doing to fight for their constituents, when they're now in the minority during this Trump administration. One of the things we wanted to talk about today, of course, was free speech. And you've got people who are green card holders, people who are permanent residents. There is a student from Columbia named Mahmoud Khalil who led protests concerning the Israel-Hamas war, who has been threatened with deportation. He's now fighting that in court. The Trump administration say there are many more to come. What is the threat to free speech right now, in your view?
So I think there's a huge threat to free speech. And you mentioned the case of the Columbia student where the administration arrested him and is trying to deport him, allegedly on the basis of things he said around these protests at Columbia. But we're also seeing attacks on the media. Trump, either as a candidate or president, has sued multiple media outlets for things they said, like CBS, because he didn't like the way they edited an interview of his opponent. He sued an Iowa newspaper because he didn't like their polling results. He had the FTC reopen complaints against two broadcast entities, ABC and CBS, after they'd already been closed. So he's really attacking the media in a lot of ways. He's attacking the universities by actually saying he doesn't like what they're saying or what their students are saying. He's attacking law firms and trying to determine who they represent. So I think we're seeing a broad-based attack on free speech by an administration that takes any criticism as some kind of attack on the country, which is not our history, obviously.
Yeah. And so how do you protect free speech when you've got the executive branch trying to chill free speech, trying to scare people, quite frankly, suing people, and these people are capitulating? Columbia said, okay, well, we'll make some changes when they threatened a $400 million grant. We'll see what happens with the University of Pennsylvania, as they have had some grant funding threatened as well. We've seen media outlets capitulate. We've seen the Washington Post cancel their opinion page and turn it into something else. And so we've seen this happen over and over and over again. What can Democrats do to protect people's free speech in this kind of climate?
Right. I mean, I think we're at a place where it's not just Democrats, but everyone has to stand up to protect free speech in this climate, because traditionally they talk about the White House as being a bully pulpit. I think Teddy Roosevelt was the one who first talked about this, a bully pulpit, meaning bully as in a good place you can talk about issues of importance. But this president seems to view it as a place he can bully people. And he's picking off one institution after another. He goes after one college, and all the colleges take down all their DEI programs and materials. And he goes after one broadcast entity, and all of a sudden they're all scrubbing what they're talking about and saying. He goes after a newspaper, or the newspaper, we've got this corporate overlay to a lot of this, because the Washington Post is owned by the same guy as owns Amazon. So he doesn't want Amazon to be implicated. So he pulls back on what's going on at the Post. We've seen similar things with respect to ABC settling a case because they also own Disney and they don't want Trump to hurt that. So we're just at a moment when people across the board, Democrats, Republicans, universities, law firms, corporations, everybody needs to stand up to this because it is impacting all of us. Now, you mentioned the Columbia student, and I sit, I'm the ranking member, which means the lead Democrat on the Constitution Subcommittee. So with my colleagues, Pramila Jayapal, who's the head of the Immigration Subcommittee, and Jamie Raskin, who's the lead Democrat on the entire Judiciary Committee, we sent a letter to the administration, which is how you communicate, saying, what the heck is going on here? You've arrested this guy under a 1952 law, and you said you're deporting him because the Secretary of State has determined he's a threat to national security. What's the threat? What's going on? And it's really significant that when they arrested him, he had not been charged with any crime.
Yeah.
If you think someone is a problem in this country and needs to be deported, if they're charged with a crime, then there's a process to do this. But this is completely outside this. And it's really interesting that this law was declared unconstitutional back in 1996. And the judge who said it was unconstitutional because it was too broad, gave too much power to the Secretary of State, was Marianne Trump Berry, the president's sister. So this is a law, it's literally a McCarthy era law back in the Red Scare days when, people were talking about infiltration from within. It is a McCarthy-era law that has not been used. And that's what we asked about. Why are you doing this? What is this person allegedly done?
It's interesting to watch. For those who don't know, McCarthyism, of course, happened in the 50s, where you had a senator who would just point to people and say, "You're a communist," and that person
exactly.
would just become, a pariah. So, you watch all of these things happen, and one of the things I wonder about is the workers. So Democrats have traditionally been the party of the working person, but you found a lot of working people, blue collar workers, voting for Donald Trump in this last election. And he comes in and starts firing all these workers, federal workers. And so, what are Democrats doing to protect these workers to kind of take back the mantle of being the party of the working class?
Well, we are working closely with the unions that represent the workers as they file lawsuits trying to push back on these orders. We have filed legislation that would provide additional protection, but we need in the House, we need to get 3 more Republicans to join us, 3 Republicans, period, to join us. Basically, across all of this, the issue is that our Republican colleagues need to be as concerned about their constituents as they are about what Trump's going to say about them. We need people to stand up and say this is wrong. When we had the State of the Union address a couple weeks ago, I invited an IRS worker who'd just been fired. This guy was a 20-year Navy veteran. He was working as a taxpayer advocate, helping people file their taxes and straighten out any issues there. And he got fired because he was a probationary employee. Great reviews. Our office had found him a wonderful help when people had issues. And he got fired because the Trump administration just decided to fire all the probationary employees. When he was down here, a reporter asked him who he'd voted for in the last election. He said he voted for Trump because Trump said he was going to protect the veterans. But he was sorry that he had, because if he had to do it over again, he would vote for Kamala Harris.
That's Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon joined us this morning on WURD Radio. I want to thank you, and I want to give you an opportunity to give people an action step or place or person that they can contact to figure out what they can do in these days and times to deal with what's going on.
Look, it's important that people contact their elected representatives. We've got, at the federal level, we've got 2 senators. Everybody has a congressperson. They should contact them and let them know what they're thinking. I mean, if the person is aligned with your beliefs, then it's good support for them to know that you support them. But if that person isn't aligned with your beliefs, then they need to know it. We've seen it work. That when senators in particular get pushed, they change their votes. And that's what we need to happen to push back on this administration. We need particularly our Republican members of Congress to stand up for their constituents.
You're listening to The Week on WURD.
Hi, I'm Tonya Pendleton, the host of Reality Check, airing Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on WURD Radio. Join me as I talk to newsmakers and noisemakers in politics, sports, entertainment, culture, and tech. We'll take deep dives into stories from Philadelphia and beyond. Tune in at 10 a.m. Monday through Thursday on WURD Radio for your daily Reality Check.
This is The Week on WURD, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on WURD Radio. Make sure you follow WURD Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Up next, Working Families Party National Director Maurice Mitchell discusses voter education and public support with Reality Check host Tonya Pendleton.
We've got daily news from the White House and the administration that is disturbing, disheartening, just about anything that you can think of that is in line with this administration appears to be one, if not both of those things. We have someone here who's going to address some of this and give us some idea of what can be done as seemingly our rights are being rolled away. Not seemingly, that's what's happening. Let's just keep it real. Maurice Mitchell is the National Director for the Working Families Party. It is a multiracial party that fights for workers over bosses. I like that already. Now, he is also a leader in the movement for Black Lives. So he's got a ton of stuff I'm sure that he's going to talk to us about today. Maurice, welcome to Reality Check. Great to see you.
It's good to be here. So good to be with you.
So, Maurice, I'm just going to put it out there. You're part of the you're the director of the Working Families Party. And working families are the backbone of this country. And yet it seems that this administration, despite running on helping these working families, is actually one of the things that they have done best is run through people's rights and take their jobs. Mm-hmm. But the response to this seems lukewarm. Quite honestly, it's like everyone's just like, what is the Working Families Party doing to help us at this point?
Wow. Well, yeah, I couldn't have described it better. They ran, I want to remind people, they ran on affordability. You heard them talk about the price of eggs, the price of groceries, right? And then the minute Donald Trump was inaugurated, man, that shift was hard. In fact, I want to remind people, during his inauguration, he had the world's richest men in what I call oligarch row, right? Right there, and sitting and witnessing his inauguration. And that, to me, set the stage for everything that we're experiencing. This is government for the billionaires, not for everyday working class people. And what Working Families Party has been doing since inauguration, but even before inauguration, we've been getting the word out. We've been calling the representatives that are supposed to be providing oversight, but they're not doing their jobs. We've been calling them out. So I don't know if you've been watching. There's this thing called congressional recess. It's when Congress people go back to their districts because they spend a lot of their time in DC. So it's an opportunity for all of them to go back to their districts, to listen to the people that voted for them, people that they represent. And we've been bringing that fire. And it hasn't just been in Democratic districts. It's been in Republican districts, sometimes deep Republican districts. And what we've been seeing is that people are fired up. People are upset. People are not comfortable, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, black, white, with Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. I like to remind people, grew up in apartheid South Africa, right? He grew up with emerald mine wealth, came to this country, and now he's not an elected official, but he's in the Oval Office. He's in cabinet meetings. He's getting briefings. And for the past few weeks, what has he done? He's attempted to take a hammer and destroy all the institutions that provide services to us, services to working people. And people are upset. And I know you're not seeing some of it, but I'm seeing some of it on the grassroots. And Working Families Party, we've been holding hearings when Republicans are not showing up because their party has said, don't hold any more of these town halls. Right. So these town halls are these meetings that, people from all walks of life could come and be in a dialogue with their local representative. They're like, don't hold any of these town halls anymore because they're hearing it from their constituents. So what I want to say is that I'm feeling this grassroots groundswell of everyday people who have had it after just a few weeks of the Trump administration. Look, there were some people. Not a lot in our community. I like to remind us, we're the community of the 92%, and we're the community of the almost 80%. Black men and women understood the assignment. But even in our community, there were a few people who were like, well, let's give this guy a chance, right? Gas prices or the price of groceries or the price of rents, they are high. Maybe the economy could be a bit better. But after a few weeks of this insanity, listen, I'm out hearing a lot of people articulate that line. I'm not seeing the folks. I used to get in my comments, these folks who call themselves blacks for Trump or whatever, crickets now, right? Because I think even his supporters are wondering what's going on. And so I believe that that's going to be the beginning of a huge mass movement that will hopefully take these folks out of office, right? We have opportunities in 2 years with the midterm elections. We have some opportunities even earlier with municipal elections. And there's things that people could do today.
Okay, so let's start there, because I don't think we have 2 years, respectfully. If we wait for 2 years, I think that we will see our democracy in tatters. So what is it that people can do right now? Or what is the Working Families Party doing right now that can make a difference as this administration is flouting laws? They are ignoring security protocols. We just saw in this instance of these war plans being sent over basically group text.
Yep. That's right.
What can the Working Families Party do right now to help people who feel that this administration has hurt them or is going to cause them to suffer in some significant way?
Okay. So the current government that we have, Donald Trump's government, some people call it authoritarian. Some people call it an oligarchy, meaning the rule of the billionaires or the rule of the very wealthy. Some people call it fascist or neo-fascist, whatever the term you want to use. Whenever throughout history and even recently, there's been governments like this. The one thing that has defeated those governments has been the ability of everyday people, like the people listening, to become part of organizations and to eventually grow to become the biggest and largest mass movement. And at the end of the day, if the people aren't behind you, no government could prosper. If the people don't cower, then their bullying doesn't work. And so what we need is to build the largest mass movement. What we're doing is, and this is why we're doing phone calls every single week. We're bringing people to volunteer with the Working Families Party, to call people all around the country, to share with them the news. We're breaking the fog, right? Because so many people are getting misinformation from their devices, from Instagram, from X, which Elon Musk owns, Instagram and Facebook, which Zuckerberg owns. And Zuckerberg was one of the oligarchs that was so happy to be at the inauguration. So we're calling our community members directly. We're sharing with them accurate information, and we're getting them involved, right? The more we do that in the millions, the more we'll be able to shift public opinion, and the more we'll be able to actually be able to eventually vote them out. But even before that, be able to protest and also be able to stand up to them, right? Because what they want to do, and I'll give you a perfect example, they're trying to bully college students because they don't like the things that they said. They don't like that they stood up for Palestinian rights. Or they're trying to bully law firms, or they're trying to bully universities, right? And when they obey, right, it was like, I don't want the smoke, let me obey. Well, that allows the authoritarians to take more power. So when we all decide like, nope, we're not standing for it, that's when those authoritarian governments fall. And so I want to encourage everybody, join the Working Families Party, but if for whatever reason you don't align with the Working Families Party, join another organization, right? The more we join organizations that are about pushing back, civil rights organizations, organizations like the Working Families Party that work on working people's politics, your union, get involved in your union if you have one. These are all ways that everyday people could begin to push back. We need to build the biggest mass movement possible.
So at this stage of the situation, do we believe that even in 2 years that we will have free and fair elections? Because it appears to me with all of the news that I see that the administration is not counting on that.
They're going to try it. Look, they are going to try it. They want to take away every single right possible, including our electoral rights. But they're saying the quiet part out loud. We should believe them, take them seriously, take them literally. But what I also want to say is that we don't have to be victims of their plan, right? That we have agency. And they're hoping that we will believe in the lie that presidents are kings, right? And that all we could do is just sit in our hands and watch them take our rights from us. We can fight back. They're fighting back in the courts, actually. And a lot of these court cases are going in the way of the people, which is good, right? We're fighting back, and we're seeing like everyday people, Bernie and AOC had this weekend, they had some rallies where tens of thousands of people came out, right? We're seeing more and more of that happening. People are beginning, on April 5th, we're actually organizing rallies and demonstrations all over the country on April 5th. So that's another opportunity. And that's right now there's 600 actions all around the country in every single state and growing. And there's tens of thousands of people who have RSVP'd to actions all across the country. I think more than 100,000 already and growing. So that's going to be an important opportunity. When I talk about we need to build the biggest mass movement, trust and believe that authoritarians and bullies like Trump, when they see that, like we saw recently when people started protesting Tesla dealerships. Elon Musk didn't like that. If he was so big and bad and powerful and the world's richest man, why would dozens of protests of his showrooms make him so angry that he obsesses over it on X and tries to sick people, his followers, against them? It's because it's working. It's because it's powerful. It's because we do have the power. And so I absolutely believe they're going to try to take away every single right that they can. They're going to try to flout the Constitution, legality, decorum, all types of things, because that's what authoritarians do. And ultimately, whether or not they prevail, that is our job. Our job is to be out in the streets. Our job is to call our representatives. Our job is to go to those town halls. Our job is to also, if anybody's listening, and I want to say this, we're recruiting, because the president and the federal government, that's one level, but local governance is really powerful. We're recruiting 1,000 working people across the country to run for a local office. So the other thing that we want to do is, like, one way that we could challenge the oligarchs' rule of the wealthy is by making sure that working class people get opportunities to run for office and govern, right? So it could be rule of the people instead of rule of the wealthy, but we need people, some of which might be listening right now, to put their hat in the ring. Like, I'm talking to you and you're in Philadelphia. You're in the city of Kendra Brooks and Nicholas O'Rourke. Just everyday working class people, organizers. Nicholas is a pastor. Kendra is an organizer and mother and activist who put her hat in the ring. And now they're governing in Philly City Council and delivering in concrete ways. We need more of those people in city council, in school boards, in water boards, in fire boards, all across the country.
Maurice, let me ask you as well, and thank you for providing that information. What about boycotts? You referenced that. Do you find or have you found through your work with the Working Families Party that those are particularly effective, or are there other things that are more effective that have been proven over time?
Well, as we know, and this is something in our history as Black folks, boycotts can be very effective, right? The Montgomery bus boycott is an example of how you could really leverage your power collectively as consumers in order to deprive the people who are trying to play in your face and oppress you from your resources, and to put your resources into the systems and the people and the businesses that are supporting you. And I think it's great that so many people are not showing up and going to Target. I think that's wonderful. I think you've seen the Tesla stock plummet because so many people are disgusted with Elon Musk. So they're no longer interested in buying his products. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think we have to use all types of power, right? So we should, as workers, join a union if we have the opportunity to. That's using your power as a worker. We should figure out as a consumer how we could support the businesses and buy the products of the companies that value us, and also not support the businesses and buy the products of companies and corporations that don't value us or don't value democracy or funding MAGA, right? We should, as voters, vote for the people and elected officials that actually stand on business and are going to support the interests of working people. We, as individuals, should invest some of our time and money in a local organization that actually is representing our issues and representing our agenda. And we should consider, if we can, actually governing ourselves and finding opportunities to run for a local office. It doesn't have to be a big office like Congress. It could be one of the many local elected officials, offices and boards that make so many decisions about our lives, that make decisions about our education, make decisions about whether or not that abandoned lot across the street is going to be made productive. And maybe it could be a park. Maybe it could be affordable housing. Local elected officials decide that, right? Where you allocate money. Are you going to allocate money into youth programs? Are you going to allocate money into more police? That is a conversation that happens on the local level. So we need to use all of our power. I talk to people all the time, and they might say like, oh, marching doesn't matter, we shouldn't march, or voting doesn't matter, we shouldn't vote. And my message is, I'm somebody who grew up, who understood the idea of like, you cook what you have in the kitchen, right? Like you don't necessarily have all the resources to buy all the ingredients. You cook what you have in the kitchen, and you make it work, and you make it delicious. And that's how we should look at power. We should use the vote, and we should march, and we should protest, and we should boycott, and we should do all of these things, because these are all different ways that we're able to use our power in order to advance our agenda. And I'm speaking as an American. I'm also speaking as a Black person, right? We need to stand on business as it relates to our agenda. And so we should not be supporting the businesses and the companies that are directly playing in our faces. We should not do that, because there's plenty of local businesses. There's plenty of companies that value our community. And similarly with politics, one thing we should learn from this election was that MAGA was playing in our faces. And we should never forget that, right? And there's a lot of politicians that play in our faces. And we should stand on our agenda and be protagonists, be agents. Don't just allow them to feed you whatever they're going to feed you. This is an opportunity for us to take the ball, right? We've lived through, from politicians to corporations, whatever, taking us and our community and our country from one crisis to another. And oh my God, there's been a crisis after a crisis over these past few weeks. And so this is an opportunity for us to take the ball as everyday people, as everyday working people.
Well, Maurice Mitchell, the National Director for the Working Families Party. You can find out more about the Working Families Party at Working Families, that's working with an ING, families with an IES.org. And there you can find ways where you can be active in your local community and in the national conversation as well. Maurice Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today on Reality Check. We appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This is the Week on Word.
Level up.
The Level Up competition is heating up. The application window has closed, and we will announce the finalists soon. Now, it's time to support the contestants. Join us for the Level Up Pitch Party competition on Tuesday, April 8th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Fittler Club, 24 South 24th Street. Come out and cheer on your favorite Black woman-owned business. The Level Up competition, in partnership with WVON Chicago and KJLH Los Angeles, highlights Black women business owners and innovators who are making a difference in our communities. Join us for the pitch party Tuesday, April 8th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Fittler Club, 24 South 24th Street. Go to wordradio.com for more details. Level Up is brought to you by Comcast, the Pennsylvania Lottery, Keystone First, and Bank of America. You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com. Our last conversation for this episode features Evening Word host Dr. James Peterson with Jared C. Bass of the Center for American Progress, discussing the dismantling of the Department of Education.
Excited to welcome to the program Mr. Jared C. Bass. He is the Senior Vice President for Education Policy at Center for American Progress. Prior to this role, Attorney Bass worked on the House Appropriations Committee within the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Department in the U.S. Department of Education, and was the lead higher education staffer on the House Committee of Education and the Workforce on the Democratic side. Attorney Bass, welcome to Evening Words.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I wish we were talking about things other than the deliberate dismantling of the Department of Education, Attorney Bass. But that is what we're here to talk about today. I want to take a little piece of this out first before we dive in. And I also do want to talk about whether or not the lawsuits that have been filed, if they'll have any effect. First, and I don't remember what this entity is called, but maybe you can help me out here. One of the first things they did was shut down the mechanism for tracking and evaluating national progress and assessments for students. Again, I don't know what that unit's called, but can you first help us understand what that is and what it means that has gone away?
Yeah, so data is really important, especially when we look at the federal government and its role in education. Data plays like one of the three leading roles, right? Like transparency is what we get from it, how we're making progress. So they basically went in and gutted the Institute for Education Sciences, which houses a lot of the data tracking, apparatus of the Department of Education, things like the National Center for Education Sciences. For evaluation, there's a center that does that. Also, these regional education laboratories that try to help everyone get together, discover best practices. They dismantled that, shut that down. Or in the process of shutting it down. They also canceled contracts as well. So contracts supporting just like basic research and education, all the things that we rely on to know how our students are doing, how we can serve them better, how to educate them better. They dismantled that. And they also stopped kind of the civil rights component as well. So OCR or the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Education also does data collection, but they have taken down a lot of those resources, and that data is not accessible right now, which is my understanding. So we've got a lot of data that's just like gone missing, honestly.
Yeah, they've already shuttered the OCR in the Philadelphia region, as you probably know, which is, again, that's awful news. Jared, I'm just trying to understand if there is any logic here, Jared. So let's just say that if you've been paying attention, that you believe them, even though there's some lies in here too. Let's say you believe them that they want to transfer power back to the states in terms of education. I just want to be clear to my listeners. States control like 90% of everything that has to do. States and cities control 90 to 95% of everything that has to do with public education already. Right. The Department of Ed might do some funding. It has some funding mechanisms for college. But if you're talking about K through 12, states and cities and towns where they control 90% anyway. What the federal government does is give some money for food sometimes, tries to make sure things are unequal and put some things in place to make sure that the tax base is distributed evenly. But I just had to tell the truth first, Jared. But let's just say that if you're following their line of thinking, they're like, oh, we're giving this back to the states. How does it help the states to remove the data of assessment that's used to figure out if students are getting better or not? How does that help the states to remove the mechanisms to be able to track and understand how students improve?
Yeah, so the one major assessment the Department of Education uses, which is NAEP, right? That's like the nation's report card. It comes out every 2 years, reading. And then that is the justification that the Trump administration is using to be like, look, we haven't been making progress. We haven't recovered since 2019. Basically, we've seen standards go way, way down. Not true. Not true.
Not even here in the city of Philadelphia. Not even Philadelphia has a lot of challenges in public education. But since the pandemic, we've been making. So that's not true. But let's go ahead. I'm just trying to follow logic, Jared. I'm just trying to follow the logic.
No. So the future of NAEP is very, very unclear, right? Mm-hmm. Like we don't know what's going to happen with it. The institution that we talked about, the Institute of Education Sciences, which houses it, does in partnership with this thing called NACB, which is the governing board for NAEP. Mm-hmm. It's unclear what's going to happen with that, right? Like we don't know. But what we do know is that for some reason, this administration doesn't like data. It doesn't like data being out there. So, I think we do have lots of instruments, lots of tracking, lots of things that, the administration is required by law to track that, the future of that is very unclear. So what I tell people when I talk about this is we are trying to make sense out of nonsense. This is all nonsense. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. It's also very circular. The federal responsibility is to test and assess what the states and schools and local communities are doing. They did that. And then they're look, the federal government failed you because we tested this thing that we're required to do. You're not doing your job. So therefore we're not doing our job. And it's just it doesn't make any sense. So if you were asking yourself, like, yes, you were following along because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't understand how. I mean, this is what we refer to as a tautological argument in philosophy. I absolutely don't understand how that trick is how that works for people. I mean, I know that there are, and again, I don't want to make this partisan for you at all, Jared, but I know that there are right-wing ideologues that want to privatize public education. They really want private entities to really be able to take over what public education does. Things like vouchers and just different private schools, people don't know this, but there's a lot of money in private schools. Okay. There's two problems with that. Jared. And you tell me what the third and fourth problems are, but at least two problems with that. One, private schools don't have to teach everybody. They can teach what they want to teach, tell you, oh, you're too black to come to school here. Your disability is not wanted here. Your religion is not wanted here. Whether your region is not wanted. The private schools can do that. That's number one. But two, I don't know if you guys follow private schools or not. There's no scale, Jared. Private schools don't have the scale. So literally, you're talking about tens of millions of kids that are not going to be educated. So I don't know. Again, I don't know what the rest of that laundry list is, but even for the right-wing ideologues, it's the same thing. It's not as bad as the tautological argument, but what do they say? How do they account? If they want to privatize it, how do they make that make sense?
Again, making sense out of nonsense. The portion of students in the United States, roughly like 50 million or so are, in the education system. I think it's like 5 million, right? So like a very small percent are actually, educated. It's actually under 5.
It's less than 10%. Attorney class that the private school industry has the capacity to educate as of right now. Yes.
And so, one is an issue of scale. Two is an issue of quality. We don't know if the private schools that we're sending these kids to are actually quality institutions because they don't have to comply with federal law. They don't take NAEP. They don't do these, assessments to the same degree. And there's not like the same information or transparency or accountability that we have within the public school system. The second thing is like, we've tried this in higher education, fourth thing, right? Because you covered 1 and 2. But the fourth thing is that we try this in higher education. We have a voucher model, right? With the Pell Grant where you take your money and, you go to these schools. But the Pell Grant doesn't actually cover the full cost of tuition at a lot of these institutions, these premier selective institutions. So then you got to take out loans to be able to do that. So even if you take your, $8,000, whatever the cost may be, or the amount may be from your local school district, that may not even get you to where you need to go, with these private schools that you want to send your kids to. And not all private schools are going to offer a quality education, just as they say private.
Yeah. So let's talk for a little bit about what else are we losing? I mean, I won't even ask you about Linda McMahon. I'll ask one question. It's just, because maybe I missed something. Maybe I've been too critical of the former WWE executive. My family loves wrestling. I don't know if we love the fact that the former executive of Worldwide Wrestling is the head of the education department. Are we missing anything? Is there anything that you think that she brings to the table as Secretary of Education right now of the Department of Education?
No, I think she's taking things off the table, which is unfortunate. In her confirmation hearing, she said that she was going to listen and assess and take this time to, evaluate, understand, and learn what these programs were. Because asked point blank in the hearing about some of these programs, about ESSA, about ESCA, and some of the K-12 laws and their requirements, she said, I don't know.
She doesn't know anything about them. Yeah.
So as far as I know, I don't know that she's learned them, but, we are dismantling the Department of Education. So I do have a real concern with, someone given the benefit of the doubt who, says that they don't understand some of the basic laws that, they are tasked to oversee as Secretary of Education, doesn't, to my knowledge, conduct a full, thorough assessment of those laws and undergo the review of them, and then decides to dismantle the Department of Education. So I don't know. You let me know if I'm missing something. I also don't want to be unfair.
Now we're being tautological. I'm like, you let me know if you miss something. You let me know. I don't know.
But from my vantage point, I don't think we've missed anything. I think that what we have is a secretary who has been asked to dismantle the Department of Education as her final mission. A president of the United States who does not see the value of public education, in the United States and wants to dismantle it. I think we're asking people who don't ride public transportation, like, why we should get rid of public transportation. Like,
Right.
Like if you're not utilizing the services, then you may not get the experience. And, to be fair, I think Secretary McMahon did go to public school. But, I think certainly Elon Musk did not. I can verify that. The other thing, to talk about things that don't make sense, the president in his, address, to sign a very short executive order that also didn't make any sense, said that, we want to be able to compete with China. We want to be able to compete with Finland. We want to compete with
They all
Denmark.
have robust public school systems.
They also have departments of education. They call them ministries, but they also have like a ministry of education or a ministry of something.
And they fund way more of their population students to go to college. Much, you know what I mean? Like way more.
So the funny thing to me is like, if we want to compete with these nations and we really want to put our money where our mouth is, like literally put your money where your mouth is. Like, let's start funding, let's start increasing, let's start making public education better. So there is a way to help the Department of Education do a better job. There is a way to make the American education system better, but it is not dismantling the very thing that we need to build up.
Yeah, and again, I hope that neither one of us are saying that, hey, you couldn't reform the DOE or make it smarter or make it better or make it more. You could do all those things, but that is not what's happening now, right? They've slashed half the workforce. All right. I don't know what kind of inventory Secretary McMahon said she was going to take, but it wasn't much inventory because they slashed half the workforce within a couple of weeks, couple of days, really, of her being on the job. I don't know if you've seen any of the interviews with Sharia Smith, who was one of the labor leaders there for the Department of Education, but she's in kind of like a whistleblower fashion. She's kind of saying like, hey, these firings have not been arbitrary. They've retained people who look a certain way, and they fired a lot of women and people who look another way. Is your understanding of that, is that make sense to you in terms of what you're seeing in terms of education? I mean, you're very close to this because you've been through it on the Congress side. Now you're on the policy side. Is that kind of whistleblowing statement ringing true for you, Attorney Bass?
I think what rings true for me is the Department of Education is set up as a referee, right? Like you said earlier, it is not educating, it's not going in the classrooms. But what it does do is make sure the system's working fairly, right? Mm-hmm. The major programs that the Department of Education supports, things like Title I for low-income kids, IDEA, right, which is for students with disabilities, and it's supporting like English language learners, so people who are just learning the English language and may not be their first language. So if we think about all the people that the department is tasked with helping and what they're getting rid of, civil rights, right? Like who is going to be filing complaints with the Office of Civil Rights and who doesn't have access to access those rights? It is people who are marginalized. It is people who actually need the help of the federal government to say, these knuckleheads in my school district or these knuckleheads in my local area aren't doing right by me. We have a teacher who wants to put up a sign that says everyone here is welcome, right? And then they're like, no, you can't do that. That violates, the law. And so, I think that is a real concern. So we do need a Department of Education that stepped in to do that, but they are taking away that referee that actually says, this game isn't fair. We're not operating fairly. We need you to make some changes. So now those balls and strikes won't get called and it's not going to be a fair game.
Right. So I want to make sure that we do a little bit of inventory here of the things that will go away as the Department of Education goes away. And I'm trying to keep a running list here, but one, a Title I, which means that at least federal support for breakfast and lunch for the poorest children in this country could go away from this. The states and cities do some of that, but the federal support for that could go away. The capacity for families to work with local and federal governments to create individualized plans for students with special needs, which again, you're talking about millions of families here, right? That could go away. A lot of the ESL and a lot of the federal resources for helping folks learn the English language. That's not just people who speak another primary language, but people who also have different speech challenges and speech impediments. The federal funding, federal support for that could go away as you dismantle this program. Are there other things that might go away? Those are the things that come to mind based on what you're sharing with us in this interview.
Yeah. The only small note here is the food breakfast stuff, which is also super important. U.S. Department of Agriculture handles that.
Okay.
But the Title I stuff is federal funding just for you're in an impoverished neighborhood, right? Like Philadelphia actually has Title I supporting, I think, like roughly half of its, student population.
Yes, we have we're a very poor city. So yes, that makes sense. Yes.
But you also have things like the day after the Department of Education did its reduction in force and like cut nearly 50% of its staff, the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, went down. Like that is the application that families, fill out so they can get Pell Grants, student loans, federal work study. That went down. So we're talking about like critical services, and even the department, press releases and then executive orders is like, services won't be impacted. Like we already saw them impacted, right? Like you're not going to be able to call someone now if your servicer messes up something, or you're having an issue repaying your student loan, you need help, or you want to figure out something, or, like you're not going to be able to pick up the phone to talk to anybody anymore. And so I tell people this is like going to a restaurant that is understaffed. Like it's just gonna be bad service. Your food may come out wrong. You may not be seen for hours. It may just be burned. Like it's just a bad experience. And that's not the fault of the staff all the time who are working there. It's the fault of the managers who didn't know it was a lunch rush, or didn't know that was after church on Sunday, and that you need to have more people because that's when, people are going to be wanting their meals and stuff. So,
or in this case, didn't know the value of education in everyday society.
And you have like rural areas that are also impacted. Like this is not just a city of Philadelphia problem. This is not just a metropolitan problem. Like rural people, like folks out in rural areas also need public education because they don't have, the
there's
services.
No private school around the corner from them.
Right. So you have like, these efforts where like states that have large rural populations are like, no, we don't want vouchers because it's not going to work for us. But then people are trying to force it down their throats anyway. Or they're saying, no, we need access to these services because like, the private sector is not going to come out here. They're not going to do the private schools. Lisa Murkowski, the senator from, Alaska, in the hearing said public funding for public education. That's why I tell people, because we're not served by private educators. And so, the answer isn't let's go get the private educators out there, but it's like, let's actually listen to the people and what they're saying. And let's make sure we're supporting the public education system.
Yeah. I mean, long term, I feel like these moves around the Department of Education are literally going to make this country dumber. It's going to reduce access to education for a lot of people, for a lot of families. And I can't help but think that that's by design.
It's not, not to like go all historical, but, back in the 1950s, right, we saw Russia launch a satellite, Sputnik. And the answer wasn't like, go to your private schools, like help them teach you. Everyone pull up yourselves by your bootstraps and like, go get, good luck to you.
That's right.
Carl Graham was like, oh, crap, this other country is like serious. Like, let's go invest in these programs, right? So you had like the precursor to student loans come out of that, the National Defense of Education Act, because we saw it as a national security issue. We saw the education of our children, of researchers, of professors, like that learning element. We saw that as national security. And for some reason now we're just like, everyone go home, pack up shop, like it's been a good ride. Like that's the wrong response from this, right? So it's not that it's just a civil rights element, but like education, making sure that like your doctor is educated, making sure that like everyone has quality education is a national security issue. And, we need to be sounding the alarm on that seriously.
Yeah, we do, Attorney Bass. Neither one of us are national security experts, but a lot has changed in terms of this nation's interface with foreign policy, NATO alliances, and the geopolitical arrangements established in that post-World War II moment. At that moment, when they do Sputnik, Republicans and Democrats in this country see Russia as a political opponent and say, hey, we gotta keep up with them. They see China as a political opponent and say, hey, we gotta keep up with them. I'm not sure that this administration sees those actors on the global stage in the same way.
No. And again, not to get like super technical here, but like we just invested a whole bunch of money into semiconductors because we're like, oh crap, we need to make sure that's invested here. President of the United States is like, no, it is a bipartisan bill, Chips and Science Act, right?
Yep.
Gonna like help, production. We got places coming out in Ohio, everywhere, right? Like it's really good to make sure that we're keeping up and able to produce for a whole host of reasons, semiconductors, wave of the future. Bipartisan bill, the president comes out and says, no, bad deal. I don't like that. So again, like another split moment for the United States, and we've had a lot of them, but instead of leaning into them and making sure we are preparing the American citizens to face that, we're leaning out. We're packing up shot and letting other countries surpass us.
This is the Week on Word.
Good morning. It's Solomon Jones, host of the hottest morning show on radio, Wake Up With WURD. Listen weekdays from 7 to 10 a.m. for laughter, for fun, for politics, for family, for more than you can imagine. Check it out every day, Monday through Friday. Wake Up With WURD on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com. And check us out on the Word Radio app.